You know, what we're about to talk about isn't just another story from a history book. I want you to think of it as something different. Think of it as a blueprint, one that was forged in snow and desperation almost 80 years ago. It's a design that shows us how, when everything seems impossible, the actions of a few thousand soldiers can teach us some really profound lessons about resilience, about preparation, and about the raw, stubborn power of defiance that, honestly, still echoes today.
I mean, just listen to that one sentence from a soldier whose name we'll never know. It's the whole story right there. And it's not arrogance, not at all. It's a state of mind. It's the defiant core of a group of men who, when they were told they were trapped, beaten, and doomed, looked at the overwhelming enemy force all around them and felt sorry for them. So the real question is, what does it take to build that kind of mindset? That's what we're going to unpack.
All right, Section 1, Hitler's Final Gamble. To really get that defiant mindset, you have to understand the reality they were facing. So picture it. It's December 16th, 1944. On the Western Front, there's this dangerous feeling in the air, that the war is pretty much over. But in total secrecy, Hitler is about to unleash his last desperate gamble, Operation WWII, or Watch on the Rhine. We know it today as the Battle of the Bulge. And the goal? It was audacious, to say the least. Punch a giant hole through the Allied lines, split their armies in two, and grab the port of Antwerp, choking off all their supplies.
Now, these numbers you're looking at, this isn't just a spreadsheet. This was a ghost army. This wasn't just a counterattack. It was a colossal force, an absolute behemoth. And they moved it all through the thick Ardennes forest completely in secret. At night, with total radio silence, even using horses instead of trucks sometimes to muffle the sound. The whole plan hinged on two things: speed and surprise. And right at the heart of that plan, the absolute key that would unlock everything, was a little Belgian town, a critical crossroads called Bastogne. The German high command knew it. They had to take that town in 48 hours. If they didn't, their entire offensive would just grind to a halt and die in the snow.
This quote from PFC Lecky, man, it just perfectly captures the seismic shock that hit the Allies. Just try to imagine being there. It's 5:30 in the morning, freezing cold. All of a sudden, the entire forest just erupts. 1,600 German artillery pieces all open fire at the exact same moment. As Lecky later wrote, "The earth shook beneath us, trees exploded into splinters, the very air seemed to scream." The surprise was total. American units, a lot of them brand new to combat, were just vaporized. And panic? Well, panic started spreading like wildfire.
Section 2, Trapped in the Snow. So, into this absolute vortex of chaos, a frantic order gets to the 101st Airborne Division. You know them, the Screaming Eagles. They were resting in France way back from the front, and there is zero time to plan, no time to prepare. They're literally pulled out of their barracks, they don't have winter coats, no proper gear, and they're just thrown onto trucks for a 100-mile nonstop race to hold that vital crossroads at Bastogne before the German panzers can get there.
Can you imagine this scene? The 101 was driving into the storm, while the river of men was running from it. Private Burgett described this surreal nightmare of a journey, driving past these endless columns of retreating American troops, their faces just hollowed out by fear. Some guys didn't even have their weapons, and they're all just shouting these warnings into the night. One soldier actually grabbed his arm and pleaded, "There's thousands of them, tigers, panthers, everything." But the trucks of the 101, they just kept on rolling, right into the darkness.
And just look how fast everything spirals out of control. They win the race to Bastogne, but only by a few hours. For 2 crucial days, they fight these ferocious delaying actions on the outskirts, like in the village of Noville, where this tiny American task force held off an entire panzer division. They bought priceless time for the rest of the defenses to get set up. But by December 20th, the window slams shut. The last road is cut, the vice is tightened. And just like that, 18,000 Americans are now completely surrounded by a German force nearly twice their size.
Now, the conditions inside this pocket, they weren't just bad. They were something out of a nightmare. A thick, freezing fog grounded every single Allied airplane, which meant no air support, and crucially, no resupply. Ammunition was so low that artillery was rationed to just 10 rounds per gun per day. Think about that. Surgeons were doing amputations by candlelight because the main aid station was overrun. Guys were literally eating snow for water, and their feet were freezing solid inside their boots. To survive, some soldiers actually had to hack chunks of frozen meat off of dead horses and cook them over fires made from ration boxes. This wasn't just a fight against an enemy, it was a primal struggle against starvation and the cold itself.
So now we get to Section 3, a one-word answer. It's December 22nd. The Americans are at their absolute weakest point, and the Germans decide it's time to deliver the psychological death blow. 4 German officers emerge out of the fog, walking toward the American lines waving a white flag of truce. They're carrying a formal, typed-up ultimatum. In their minds, this fight is already over. This is just the paperwork.
I mean, the tone of this message is just so confident, it's almost condescending, right? It talks about the fortune of war and presents surrender as the only logical, honorable way to avoid being completely annihilated. And you know what? From a purely military point of view, they were 100% right. The Americans were trapped, they were freezing, and they were running out of literally everything you need to fight a war.
So just put yourself in that position for a second. Seriously, you're the commander, your men are starving, they are almost out of ammunition, the enemy has you completely surrounded and is promising, in writing, to destroy you. Surrendering seems like the only sane thing to do to save lives. So, what do?
The story goes that the acting commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, had to be woken up from a much-needed nap to be told the Germans were here to accept his surrender. His immediate, unfiltered, and just quintessentially American response was one word: nuts. When his staff tried to brainstorm a more formal official reply, they all just kind of looked at each other and agreed. His first reaction was the best one. So that's what they typed up and sent back. To the German commander. Nuts. The American commander.
Well, the German officers were completely baffled. The word just didn't translate. They had to ask Colonel Joseph Harper, the guy who delivered the message, what it meant. And his blunt translation, it means go to hell, left absolutely zero room for misunderstanding. But here's the crucial point. That one little word did more damage to German morale than 1,000 artillery shells ever could have. It was a defiant laugh in the face of logic, and it was a signal that these men, they just would not break.
Section 4, Patton's impossible pivot. So while the men in Bastogne are digging in for the massive attack they know is coming, a totally different drama is unfolding about 130 miles to the south. The Supreme Commander Eisenhower holds this emergency conference with all his top generals, and the mood is grim. He needs someone to attack north and relieve Bastogne. He turns to the one man in the room who actually seems to be relishing the crisis, General George S. Patton.
So Eisenhower asks how long it would take to get a counterattack going, and Patton just stuns every single officer in that room. He says, "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours." And people literally laughed out loud. What he was proposing, it was considered a logistical impossibility. To take an entire army that's already fighting, pivot at 90 degrees, and then march it over 100 miles on these treacherous, icy roads in the middle of a blizzard, it had never, ever been done.
But this is the heart of the blueprint. Patton's move wasn't a miracle. It was the direct result of relentless preparation. For weeks, his intelligence officers had been warning him about a possible German buildup. While a lot of other people dismissed it, Patton made his staff drop 3 separate contingency plans for this exact scenario. He had already pre-positioned fuel and ammo along the routes he might take. He had even issued preliminary orders to his commanders before he even walked into Eisenhower's meeting. See, he didn't react to the crisis. He had already prepared for it.
As soon as Patton walked out of that meeting, he made a phone call and spoke just 2 words: play ball. And instantly, one of the greatest operational maneuvers in military history kicked off. 133,000 vehicles. Just try to picture that. An entire city made of steel, roaring to life, reorienting 250,000 men, and charging north toward Bastogne.
All right, Section 5, the breaking of the siege. For the defenders of Bastogne, help couldn't come a second too soon. After days of non-stop German attacks that followed their defiant nuts reply, the turning point finally came on December 23rd. And maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe it was divine intervention after Patton famously ordered his chaplain to write a prayer for good weather, but the skies cleared. For the first time in a week, the sun actually broke through the fog.
A clear sky meant the planes could fly, and the air above Bastogne just filled with hundreds of C-47 transport planes. Soldiers who'd been trapped in frozen foxholes for a week climbed out, waving and cheering with tears streaming down their faces. Over the next few days, more than 1,000 tons of supplies, we're talking ammunition, food, plasma, medicine, rained down from the sky, giving them just enough strength to hold on a little bit longer.
And then, on the day after Christmas, it happened. After fighting for every bloody yard on the ground for days, Lieutenant Colonel Crichton, Abrams' 37th Tank Battalion, made its final, desperate push. At 4:50 in the afternoon, the lead Sherman tank, its name was Cobra King, crashed through the last German defenses and made contact with the paratroopers. The siege was finally broken.
So, what's the legacy? The relief of Bastogne was way more than just the end of a siege. It was the beginning of the end for Hitler's last great offensive.
The Germans had thrown their entire strategic reserve into this one battle, and that reserve was shattered against the unbreakable rock of Bastogne's defense. From this point on, the road to Berlin was well and truly open.
But that victory, it came at an enormous price. And these numbers you see here aren't just abstract figures. They represent the savage nature of the fighting, where freedom was paid for in blood and in frostbite. Every single digit is a life that was altered forever in those frozen forests.
You know, maybe the most powerful legacy of all comes from the enemy themselves. German soldiers had been fed years of propaganda that Americans were soft, that they would break and run, but what they ran into around Bastogne completely shattered that myth. This quote from a captured German major, it just says everything. The defiance of the 101st didn't just win a battle, it earned the grudging and ultimate respect of their enemy.
So we come back to that blueprint. What does it really teach us? Well, it teaches us that when you feel surrounded, when the odds seem impossible, and when logic is screaming at you to just surrender, your response is what defines the outcome. And it shows us that miracles, like Patton's relief column, they're never born from luck. They are born from foresight, from relentless planning, and from preparation. Bastogne is this timeless reminder that the human spirit, when it's truly defiant, is the most powerful force on Earth.